The chemical industry grew in scale along with American industry generally in the late 19th century. So from about 1880 on up to 1914, it experienced very rapid growth. The fear on the part of industrial chemists was that they were losing ground to mechanical engineers and in some cases civil engineers. They needed to separate themselves from chemists as a whole in order to reinforce their position as the one you turn to run a chemical plant or to design a chemical plant. The way they began to do it was to emphasize their management role and their engineering role rather than their role as chemists, to create the idea of the chemical engineer. The problem that chemical engineering had early was nobody knew what it was. The earliest programs, MIT's was the very first in 1888, essentially cobbled together a bunch of existing courses that they already had on the books, and they called it chemical engineering. There was no really accepted definition of what chemical engineering was, how to justify it intellectually. The critical concept that allowed chemical engineering to establish itself as a unique branch of knowledge, not simply an offshoot of chemistry, not simply an offshoot of engineering or a hybrid between the two, was the concept of unit operations. The idea had been suggested as early as the 1880s, 1890s by a British engineer, but it didn't catch on in Britain, and he didn't express it quite as implicitly as Arthur D. Little did in the middle of the 1910s when he was serving as chairman of the visiting committee looking at the combined departments of chemistry and chemical engineering at MIT. Arthur D. Little is one of the key figures in the early history of chemical engineering. In MIT's chemical engineering department, he not only sells them on the idea of unit operations as a way to reorganize the curriculum, he's also the one that pushes for some better way to give chemical engineering students an acquaintance with industrial conditions. And that leads to the School of Chemical Engineering Practice that MIT creates also in the mid-1910s. And then he goes out and has sufficient influence to bring in the first big hunk of money to finance it, $300,000 from George Eastman. I suspect Little felt strongly about the idea of the practice school from his own experience, going out from a MIT chemistry program that didn't offer a lot of practical experience and getting thrown into the sulfite paper mill where all of a sudden he's dealing with an industrial scale process and didn't quite feel ready for it. He managed to adapt fairly quickly. He sucked it up, adapted, and moved on, but I suspect it was that early experience that convinced him that chemical engineering graduates needed more exposure before they were tossed out to the wolves. It made the chemical engineering department at MIT something unique and special that nobody else in the United States was able to imitate.